Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Very warm welcome to this Monday, 5th September 2022 morning Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam discussion. Today we are reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 2, entitled The Cosmic Manifestation, Chapter 2, The Lord in the Heart, text 35. Before we discuss on this verse, let's sing Jai Radha Madhav. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivara Dhari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivara Dhari, Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivara Dhari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivara Dhari, Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivara Dhari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivara Dhari, Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Shri Radhe. Jai Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Shri Radhe. Jai Nitai Sachinandana Gaura Hari, Nitai Sachinandana Gaura Hari, Jaya Nitai Sachinandana Gaura Hari, Nitai Sachinandana Gaura Hari, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nittai Gaura, Hari Bol, Nittai Gaura, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nittai Gaura, Hari Bol. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajagacharya Stottra Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। नामाचार्य श्रीला हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। वृंदावन धाम की जय। मथुरा धाम की जय। जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय। मायापुर धाम की जय। गंगा माई की जय। यमुना माई की जय। तुलसी देवी की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय। सामवेद भक्त वृंद की जय। All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Sarvam Shri Krishna Arpanamastu Krishne Matirastu Hare Krishna. ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 2, Text 35. bhagavān sarva-bhūteṣu lakṣitaḥ svātmanā hariḥ dṛśyair buddhi-ādibhir draṣṭā lakṣaṇair anumāpakaiḥ. bhagavān sarva-bhūteṣu lakṣitaḥ svātmanā hariḥ dṛśyair buddhi-ādibhir draṣṭā lakṣaṇair anumāpakaiḥ. bhagavān sarva-bhūteṣu lakṣitaḥ svātmanā hariḥ dṛśyair buddhi-ādibhir draṣṭā lakṣaṇair anumāpakaiḥ. Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, sarva, all, bhūteṣu, in the living entities, lakṣitaḥ is visible, svātmanā, along with the self, hariḥ, the Lord, dṛśyair, by what is seen, buddhi-ādibhir, by intelligence, draṣṭā, one who sees, lakṣaṇair, by different signs, anumāpakaiḥ, by hypothesis. Translation: the personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna, is in every living being along with the individual soul, and this fact is perceived and hypothesized in our acts of seeing and taking help from the intelligence. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. The general argument of the common man is that since the Lord is not visible to our eyes, how can one either surrender unto him or render transcendental loving service unto him? To such a common man, here is a practical suggestion given by Srila Shukadeva Goswami as to how one can perceive the Supreme Lord by reason and perception. Actually, the Lord is not perceivable by our present materialized senses. But when one is convinced of the presence of the Lord by a practical service attitude, there is a revelation by the Lord's mercy, and such a pure devotee of the Lord can perceive the Lord's presence always and everywhere. He can perceive that intelligence is the form, direction of the Paramatma, plenary portion of the personality of Godhead. The presence of Paramatma in everyone's company is not very difficult to realize, even for the common man. The procedure is as follows. One can perceive one's self-identification and feel positively that he exists. He may not feel it very abruptly, but by using a little intelligence, he can feel that he is not the body. He can feel that the hand, the leg, the head, the hair, and the limbs are all his bodily parts and parcels. But as such, the hand, the leg, the head, etc., cannot be identified with his self. Therefore, just by using intelligence, he can distinguish and separate his self from other things that he sees. So the natural conclusion is that the living being, either man or beast, is the seer, and he sees besides himself all other things. So there is a difference between the seer and the seen. Now, by little use of intelligence, we can also readily agree that the living being who sees the things beyond himself by ordinary vision has no power to see or to move independently. All our ordinary actions and perceptions depend on various forms of energy supplied to us by nature in various combinations. Our senses of perception and of action, that is to say, our five perceptive senses of hearing, touch, sight, taste, and smell, as well as our five senses of action, namely hands, legs, speech, evacuation organs, and reproductive organs, and also our three subtle senses, namely mind, intelligence, and ego, 13 senses in all, are supplied to us by various arrangements of gross or subtle forms of natural energy. And it is equally evident that our objects of perception are nothing but the products of the inexhaustible permutations and combinations of the forms taken by natural energy. As this conclusively proves that the ordinary living being has no independent power of perception or of motion, and as we undoubtedly feel our existence being conditioned by nature's energy, we conclude that he who sees his spirit and that the senses as well as objects of perception are material. The spiritual quality of the seer is manifest in our dissatisfaction with the limited state of materially conditioned existence. That is the difference between spirit and matter. There are some less intelligent arguments that matter develops the power of seeing and moving as a certain organic development, but such an argument cannot be accepted because there is no experimental evidence that matter has anywhere produced a living entity. Trust no future, however pleasant. Idle talks regarding future development of matter into spirit are actually foolish because no matter has ever developed the power of seeing or moving in any part of the world. Therefore, it is definite that matter and spirit are two different identities, and this conclusion is arrived at by the use of intelligence. Now we come to the point that the things which are seen by little use of intelligence cannot be animate unless we accept someone as a user of or director of the intelligence. Intelligence gives one direction like some higher authority, and the living being cannot see or move or eat or do anything without the use of intelligence. When one fails to take advantage of intelligence, he becomes a deranged man. And so a living being is dependent on intelligence or the direction of a superior being. Such intelligence is all pervading. Every living being has his intelligence, and like intelligence, being the direction of some higher authority is just like a father giving direction to his son. The higher authority who is present and residing within every individual living being is the super self. At this point in our investigation, we may consider the following question. On the one hand, we realize that all our perceptions and activities are conditioned by arrangements of material nature, yet we also ordinarily feel and say, I am perceiving or I am doing. Therefore, we can say that our material senses of perception and action are moving because we are identifying the self with the material body, and that the superior principle of super self is guiding and supplying us according to our desire. By taking advantage of the guidance of super self in the form of intelligence, we can either continue to study and to put into practice our conclusion that I am not this body, or we can choose to remain in the false material identification, fancying ourselves to be the possessors and doers. Our freedom consists in orienting our desire either toward the ignorant material conception, misconception, or the true spiritual conception. We can easily attain to the true spiritual conception by recognizing the super self, Paramatma, to be our friend and guide, and by dovetailing our intelligence with superior intelligence or Paramatma. The super self and the individual self are both spirit, and therefore the super self and the individual self are both qualitatively one and distinct from matter. But the super self and the individual self cannot be on an equal level because the super self gives direction or supplies intelligence, and the individual self follows the direction, and thus actions are performed properly. The individual is completely dependent on the direction of the super self because in every step, the individual follows the direction of the super self in the matter of seeing, hearing, thinking, feeling, willing, etc. So, as far as common sense is concerned, we come to the conclusion that there are three identities, namely matter, spirit, and super spirit. Now, if we go to the Bhagavad Gita or the Vedic intelligence, we can further understand that all the three identities namely matter, individual spirit, and the super spirit, are all dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The super self is a partial representation of plenary portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Bhagavad Gita affirms that the Supreme Personality of Godhead dominates all over the material world by his partial representation only. God is great, and he cannot be simply an order supplier of the individual selves. Therefore, the super self cannot be a full representation of the Supreme Self, Purushottama, the absolute personality of Godhead. Realization of the super self by the individual self is the beginning of self realization. And by the progress of such self realization, one is able to realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead by intelligence, by the help of authorized scriptures, and principally by the grace of the Lord. The Bhagavad Gita is a preliminary conception of the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna, and Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is a further explanation of the signs of Godhead. So, if we stick to our determination and pray for the mercy of the director of intelligence sitting within the same bodily tree, like a bird sitting with another bird, as explained in the Upanishads, certainly the purport of the revealed information in the Vedas become clear to our vision, and there is no difficulty in realizing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. The intelligent man, therefore, after many births of such use of intelligence, surrenders himself at the lotus feet of Vasudeva, as confirmed by Bhagavad Gita 7.19. Before we discuss on this verse, let us offer some prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Nama Shreshtham Manamapi Shachiputram Atra Swarupam Rupam Tasyagrajam Murupurim Mathurim Goshthavati Radha Kundam Girivaram Maho Radhika Madhavasham Prapto Yasya Pratita Kripaya Shri Gurum Tam Natosmi Vandeham Shri Gurum Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha Adadandastrinam Dante Idam Yachah Punah Punah Shriman Rupa Padambhojam Dhulisyam Janma Janmani. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dīnabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 2, Text 35. bhagavān sarva-bhūteṣu lakṣitaḥ svātmanā hariḥ dṛśyair buddhi-ādibhir draṣṭā lakṣaṇair anumāpakaiḥ. The personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, is in every living being with the individual soul. And this fact is perceived and hypothesized in our acts of seeing and taking help from the intelligence. Let us try and understand this verse, the line by line. So, The first line is bhagavān sarva-bhūteṣu. The personality of Godhead, sarva is all, bhūteṣu is in the living entities. This is very, very important to understand. The first line, and similarly all the other three lines, we can try and understand. This verse is being spoken by Srila Shukadeva Goswami to Srila Parikshit Maharaj. And we know Shukadeva Goswami is the parrot of Srimati Radharani. Shuka. Shuka means parrot. And he is eternally liberated person. Srila Shukadeva Goswami. Nitya Siddha. And whatever words come from his lotus mouth transcends the modes of material nature. It is transcendental to the modes. So we understand that in the conditioned state of existence, the living entity is under the influence of the three modes of material nature. There is mode of goodness, mode of passion, and mode of ignorance. Satvat sanjayate jnanam rajasa lobhamevacha pramada moho tamaso bhavato ajnanamevacha. When there is mode of goodness, one is in that state of mind where there is interest in hearing the transcendental subject matters. In the mode of passion, there is lobha and moha. There is passion, there is greed, and there is attachment. That is mode of passion. Attachment to material things. And then the mode of ignorance, pramada moho tamaso. Pramada. It is like madness. Why is it madness? Because it is the state of existence where one is not inclined to do anything. In the mode of passion, at least, there is this energy to accumulate material things. But in the mode of ignorance, it is totally inert. It is in a state of laziness, indolence. So one has to, in order to have a little bit of interest in these discussions of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Bhagavad Gita, one has to have a trace of mode of goodness, at least an iota of mode of goodness. And when that is available, one can slowly make it more by getting involved in Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnum Smaranam Padasevanam Archanam Vandanam Dasyam Sakyam Atmanivedanam. The Nava Vidha Bhakti, 9 kinds of devotional service that all the living entities can get involved in. It is starting with Shravanam, hearing. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Kṛṣṇa mentions in Bhagavad Gita, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadhami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. So this is the dṛśyair buddhi-ādibhir draṣṭā, the third line in this verse. Dṛśyair, by what is seen, buddhi-ādibhir, by intelligence, draṣṭā, one who sees. So that is dadhami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. So tesham satata yuktana. Kṛṣṇa mentions in Bhagavad Gita that those living entities who are constantly linking with me, satata. Satata is always, constantly. Yuktanam. Yukta is being attached, being linked. Yogi yunjita satatam atmanam rahasi stita nisprah sarva kamebhyo nirashir aparigraha. So Kṛṣṇa mentions in Bhagavad Gita, who is the real yogi? Who is the real person who is attached to me. So that yogi is yunjita satatam. He is connected to me constantly and always connected to me. Yogi yunjita sat atmanam rahasi sthitaha. So Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita that such a person is always situated within. Atmanam rahasi sthita. Atma ramascha munayo nigrantapi urukrame kurvanti ahetukim bhaktim itham bhuta guno hari. So that is Atma Rama, one who rejoices within. That when one is in that state of rejoicing within oneself, Atma Rama, such a person is called Atma Rama. Arama is when one is rejoicing, and Atma is within. So when one is rejoicing within, Nigranthapi Urukrame. So that is when one rejoices within, all the knots of material conditioning is removed. Nigranthapi Urukrame. What happens after the knots are removed and one is rejoicing within? Kurvanti ahaitukim bhaktim. That is the third state. The third state is one is being engaged in costless devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ahaitukim bhaktim. Itham bhuta guno hari. So this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari. So Hari is mentioned here as well. Lakṣitaḥ svātmanā hariḥ. Visible along with the self, who? The Lord. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari. Harati iti Hari. One who takes away. One who takes away all this material dissatisfaction that we are having within our heart. He takes away everything. That is Hari. Harati, one who takes away. What is he taking away? Krishna takes away this samsara dava nalalila lidhaloka tranaya karunya ghana ganatvam praptasya kalyana gunarnavasya vande guru shri charanaravindam. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead provides his close associate, the Guru, the spiritual master. And the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the spiritual master, yasya deve para bhaktir yatha deve tatha guru tasyaite katita hi artha prakashante mahatmana. So yasya deve para bhakti. So when there is pure loving devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and yatha deve tatha guru, and to the Guru also the same loving devotional service is present towards the Guru. Tasyaite katita hi artha. Only to such a person the revealed purports of the Vedic wisdom is revealed. Tasyaite katita hi artha prakashante mahatmana. So this is the state of existence where that is bhagavān sarva-bhūteṣu. This one has to understand that the Supreme yomam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mai pashyati tasya hamna pranashyami sacha mena pranashyati. Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita that one who sees me in everything and everything in me, I never forget that person, and such a person never forgets me. So that is the state of real state of existence in this human form of life. When one understands that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is present everywhere in the form of his energy. So, matsthani sarva-bhūtāni na chaham teshu avasthita. Maya tatam idam sarvam jagad avyaktamurtina. Matsthani sarva-bhūtāni na chaham teshu avasthita. As Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, that Maya tatam idam sarvam. So, I am pervaded everywhere. Maya tatam jagad avyaktamurtina. So Krishna is pervading everywhere in the form of his energy. Matsthani sarva-bhūtāni na chaham teshu avasthita. So everything is based on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he is personally not present there. So he is present there in the form of his energy. And actually, in the transcendental sense, there is no difference between the energetic and the energy. But there is difference also. So this is the achintya bheda veda tattva. Simultaneously one and different. This is an achintya. It cannot be conceived in the material way, but it can be understood when we use our spiritual intelligence. So Srila Prabhupada gives the example of the sun. So the sun is a planet. There is a sun globe. And it's full of heat. And because it is full of heat, the heat is going to other planets as well. So when the sun seemingly is rising in the east, the rays of light and the heat is coming to the planets that receive that. For example, the earthly planet is receiving that. So when the sun's heat and light is coming, it is the energy of the sun that is coming. But is the energy different from the sun planet, or is it the same? It is different and same at the same time. Simultaneously one and different. How it is one? Because it is coming from the sun, it is one. How it is different? Because it is not actually the sun planet, it is different. So similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is present in the form of his energy everywhere. But he personally is present Goloka eva nivasati akhilatma bhuto. Govinda Madipurusham tamaham bhajami. Ananda chinmaya rasa pratibhavitabhis tabhivya eva nijarupataya kalabhi. Goloka eva nivasati akhilatma bhuto. Govinda Madipurusham tamaham bhajami. So Ananda chinmaya rasa pratibhavitabhis. So this is the transcendental realm where it is Ananda and Chinmaya and Rasa. Raso Vaisa. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead is full of bliss, full of Ananda, total pure consciousness. So that is Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ananda Chinmaya, and his abode is also the same. Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavitabhis Tabhivya eva Nija Rupataya Kalabhi. And this is Vadanti Tat Tattvavidas Tattvam Yadhyanam Advayam Brahmeti Paramatmeti bhagavān iti shabdayate. So that is what is mentioned here in this particular verse when it is saying bhagavān sarva-bhūteṣu lakṣitaḥ svātmanā hariḥ. The personality of Godhead is present in all the living entities and is visible along with the self. Who is visible? The Lord. So we have to understand how the Supreme Personality of Godhead is present in all the living entities. So Kṛṣṇa mentions in Bhagavad Gita that that he is present in the heart of every living entities. So sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishta mattah smritir jnanam apohanam cha. So Kṛṣṇa mentions in Bhagavad Gita that in the heart of all the living entities I am present. Upadrashta anumanta cha bharta bhokta maheshwara paramatmeti cha apiyukto dehesmin purushah para. So Kṛṣṇa is present. And what does he do as a Paramatma in the heart of all the living entities? Upadrashta, overseer. Anumanta, permitter. Bharta, maintainer. Bhokta, enjoyer. He is the Paramatma Chapipto. Dehesmin Purushah Paraha. Within the body, there is this transcendental person. So we have to understand. So first of all, the basic understanding is the understanding that we are eternal. Aham Brahmasmi. So this understanding is the foundation of spiritual experience. If this understanding is not there, then there is no foundation for spiritual experience. The foundation starts when one understands that the external body is different from me. How do we know? And Srila Prabhupada actually in the purport, and that is the spiritual intelligence. When one is able to distinguish spirit from matter. sarva-bhūteṣu yah pashyet bhagavad bhavam atmana bhutani bhagavati atmani esha bhagavatottama. Sarva-bhūteṣu yainekam bhavam avyayam ikshate avibhaktam vibhakteshu tadjnanam vidhi satvikam. So there Kṛṣṇa mentions in Bhagavad Gita, bhavam avyayam ikshate. Sarva-bhūteṣu yah pashyet bhavam avibhaktam vibhakteshu tadjnanam vidhi satvikam. So we see in the material sense, we see that everyone has got their own body. Everyone is different. But in the spiritual sense, each and every person is part and parcel of Kṛṣṇa. Mama eva amsha jiva loke jiva bhuta Sanātana. So all the living entities are eternally part and parcel of Kṛṣṇa. In that way, because they are eternally part and parcel of Kṛṣṇa, that similarity is there between all the living entities. But when we are looking at the living entities from the material eyes, what we are seeing is vibhakteshu. We are seeing all differences. We are not seeing the similarity that everyone is actually directly linked to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Everyone is aham bija pradapita sarva yonishu kaunteya murtaya sambhavantiya tasam brahma mahadionir aham bija pradapita. As Kṛṣṇa mentions in Bhagavad Gita, that I am the seed-giving father for all the living entities in this whole universe. The material nature is the mother, and I am the seed-giving father. So that, in that sense, all the living entities are brothers and sisters of any living entity. They are linked to each other because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the seed-giving father. So that is the understanding, that is the spiritual vision. Vidya vinaya sampanne brahmane gavihastini shuni chaiva shvapakecha pandita samadarshina. So that is the real knowledge, a person with knowledge, transcendental knowledge. When there is transcendental knowledge, that is Pandit. He is called Pandit. And such a Pandit, such a person with transcendental knowledge, the person might see a Brahmin, a humble Brahmin, with lots of knowledge, Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane, Gavi Hastini. He might see a cow, he might see an elephant, he might see a dog, he might see a dog eater. So he's seeing all different kinds of people, but Samadarshina. But he is seeing all of them with equal, and with the understanding that they are all eternal part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Somehow or other, they have got these bodies, which is temporary. But internally, they are eternally part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that is bhagavān sarva-bhūteṣu lakṣitaḥ svātmanā hariḥ. This understanding that I am eternal and dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yavanam jara tatha dehantaram prapti dṛśyair muhyati. As Kṛṣṇa mentions in Bhagavad Gita, there is a proprietor of the body within the body, because of which there is kaumaram yavanam jara. There is childhood, youth, and old age. Tatha dehantaram prapti. Similarly, one gives up the old body. Dṛśyair muhyati. A sober person does not get bewildered by these changes. So that is the beginning. And the intelligence mentioned is the spiritual intelligence. It is not the material intelligence here. The spiritual intelligence has to be cultivated. How does spiritual intelligence get cultivated? When it's a very basic thing. So we say, when we look at the hand, we don't say I hand. We say my hand. When we look at our legs, we don't say I leg. We say my leg. When we look at anything, when we look at our fingers, we don't say I finger, we say my finger. So we can take any part of the body, we say it is mine. So immediately the next question is, who am I? Kastvam koham kuta ayata kame janani kame tata. So this is said by Srila Shankaracharya in Bhaja Govinda. Kastvam koham. Who am I? From where I have come? Kuta ayata. Kame janani kame tata. Who is my mother and who is my father? Iti paribhavaya. So he is trying to make the living entities understand that our original nature. What is our original nature? Na jayate mriyate va kadachit nayam bhutva bhavita va na bhuya. Ajo nityam shashvatoyam purano na hanyate hanyamani sharire. As Kṛṣṇa mentions in Bhagavad Gita, that is the beginning of spiritual life. When we clearly understand that whatever is going on in the body and mind is external to me. It is not me. It needs practice. Abhyasa. Abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha gruhyate. Asamshayam mahabaho mano durnigraham chalam. Kṛṣṇa mentions in Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna that undoubtedly, O Arjuna, this mind is very difficult to control. Abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha gruhyate. He says through practice and renunciation, the mind can be controlled. So what is that practice? This practice is every time the thought is coming, one has to go to the source of the thought. And this is for the material thoughts, for the spiritual thoughts. And what is the spiritual thought? Spiritual thought is in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his devotees. That is spiritual thought. For the spiritual thoughts, there is no need to involve in this practice. Because the spiritual thought by itself is placing one on the mode of goodness and even transcending one above the mode of goodness. But the other material thoughts are actually binding oneself. And what is the material thought? It is in relationship with the material body. That is material thought and the material mind. So whenever those thoughts are coming, one has to understand whose thought is this? My thought. Next question, who am I? So immediately going back to the source. And then we understand, then that who am I question is basically helping us to understand our eternal nature. And when we understand our eternal nature, then we are in Brahma-bhuta stage. Brahma-bhuta, prasannatma. In the Brahma-bhuta stage, one is totally blissful. And what is it blissfulness coming from? It is coming from na shochati, na kamshati. Because there is no hankering and there is no lamentation. That is a blissful state of existence. What hampers the real eternal bliss that we already have? It is immediate identification with the external body and mind. When there is identification with the body and mind, there is hankering, because the body has got certain, so there is raga and dvesha. Ichha dvesha samuthena. Dvandva mohena bharata. Sarge yanti parantapa. Sarva-bhūtāni sammoham sarge yanti parantapa. So that is sammoham. That is the mohitam nabi janati mamebhya paramavayam. Tribhir gunamair bhavairabhi sarvamidam jagat. So that is the state of existence and the conditioned state of existence. One is under the influence of the three modes of material nature. Tribhir gunamair bhavair ebhi sarvamidam jagat. The whole material universe is under the influence of these three modes of material nature. Mohitam nabi janati. So Kṛṣṇa mentions when one is enamored by these three modes of material nature, one does not understand that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is present. He is the director of this wonderful drama of material existence. So this is bhagavān sarva-bhūteṣu lakṣitaḥ svātmanā hariḥ. This is understanding. So the first thing that we have to understand here is our eternal nature as totally distinct from the body and mind. Totally distinct. And that is very important to understand. So that is bhagavān sarva-bhūteṣu lakṣitaḥ svātmanā hariḥ. So we understand our eternal nature And with that understanding, we also understand that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is present along with us in the form of Paramatma. Paramatma chapi akto ukto dehesmin purusha para. Upadrashta anumantacha. Ishvara sarva-bhūtānaṁ hriddeshe arjuna tishtati brahmayan sarva-bhūtānaṁ yantra rudhani maya. As Kṛṣṇa mentions in Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is present in the heart of all the living entities, and through the yantra, as it is actually said, yantra is a machine. So through the machine that is body, and this machine is such a wonderful, complicated machine. There is this, the whole activities are going on involuntarily, right? So that is that the breathing is going on, the heart is beating. When the heart is beating, the blood is getting pumped to all the parts of the body. If you just look at the way the body is operating autonomously, it is an amazing machine, which is the hardware is the body itself, and the software is the mind and the intelligence, and also the false ego. So that is the software. So this is, that's why Kṛṣṇa says yantra rudhani maya, that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is present. Ishvara sarva-bhūtānaṁ hriddeshe arjuna tishtati. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is present in the heart of all the living entities. Brahmayan sarva-bhūtāni yantra rudhani maya. So, and the living entities are E rupe brahmanda brahmite kono bhagavān jiv guru Kṛṣṇa prasada paya bhakti lata beach. So this is the brahmite. So the living entities are constantly urdhvam gachanti satvasta madhye tishyanti rajasa jaganya guni vrittista adho gachanti tamasa. So someone is in the mode of goodness, they are going to the higher planetary system. The people in the mode of passion are staying in the middle planetary system. The people in the mode of ignorance are going into the lower planetary system. So this is constantly, this is happening. This is Brahmayan sarva-bhūtāni. And to go into different planetary systems, there should be specific types of bodies. And therefore, those specific types of bodies are provided. So this is Anumanta, Krishna's role as permitter. So when the living entity is attached to a particular type of happiness from the senses, and wants to continue enjoy in that way, Kṛṣṇa actually in the form of Paramatma and in the form of the Chaitya Guru, he's there as the Guru within the heart, and externally he's sending the Shiksha Guru and Diksha Gurus, the spiritual masters, to inform the living entities that the real happiness lies within, in conjunction with loving devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But somehow or other, the living entities are forcefully wanting to enjoy with the senses. And when that is the case, finally the Supreme Personality of Godhead says, okay, if you are so much after sense enjoyment, okay, please go ahead and enjoy your senses. And that is where the Anumanta part is taking place, permitter. So Kṛṣṇa is giving that permission. If you're so much after it, go and enjoy. And at a certain point, one will come to that state where one will understand that this is matra sparsha sukhanteya shitoshna sukha agama paino anite stam sthitikshasva bharata. So one will understand that it is temporary. It is the enjoyment that is coming from the senses is Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehena rasavarjam rasopyasya param dṛśṭā nivartate. One understands that there is a higher taste which is totally independent of sense enjoyment. When one comes to that state, rasavarjam rasopyasya param dṛśṭā nivartate. So the conditioned living entity still has got those impulses in terms of enjoying the sense gratification. But because one has actually practically experienced a higher taste, one automatically gives up the lower tastes. It is automatic. It is a state of automatically giving up. It is not a forceful giving up. Aruya krichena parampadam tata patanti yada nadrito yushmadangraya. So when one is trying to forcefully give up, one might actually reach the topmost state, but one unfortunately falls down. Why? Because one did not recognize the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anadrita. One actually disrespected. So that is the state of jnani. Unfortunately, if someone is only interested in jnana, in the transcendental knowledge, but is not involving in the loving devotional service of the Lord, bhakti pareshanubhava viraktiranyatra syat eshatisha ekakala prapadyamanasi yadashnatasya tushtik pushtik shudapaya nugasham. So this is mentioned in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, where it is said that when one is involving in loving devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, bhakti, immediately there is para isha anubhava. One is immediately experiencing the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, para isha anubhava. And then there is virakti anyatra syat. Automatically there is renunciation from everything else. Because one is experiencing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the renunciation is automatic. It is not forceful. Anasaktasya vishyan yatarham upayanjata nirbandha Kṛṣṇa sambandhe yukta vairagya mochyate. That is mentioned by Srila Rupa Goswami. That when all the things are used in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that is the real that is a renunciation which is favorable renunciation. So here we see dṛśyair buddhi-ādibhir draṣṭā. So that is the third line, by what is seen by intelligence and one who sees. So, and this fact is perceived. So the personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Kṛṣṇa, is in every living being along with the individual soul, and this fact is perceived. So that is the perceived. How it is perceived? By taking help from the intelligence. That is dṛśyair buddhi-ādibhir draṣṭā. It is perceived when we take help from the spiritual intelligence. What is the spiritual intelligence? The spiritual intelligence is going to the source of our existence. When we go to the source of our existence, we see the spiritual intelligence. What is this? What does spiritual intelligence help us in? It helps us in distinguishing matter from spirit. If it is material intelligence, the only thing material intelligence is concerned with is to keep the material enjoyment high and keep on increasing the levels of material enjoyment. That is what the material intelligence is doing. But what is spiritual intelligence doing? It is helping us to understand the difference between matter and spirit. And when we understand that originally we are spiritual, our enjoyment is costless. And that is real enjoyment. Ramante yogina anante satyanande chidatmani iti rama padenashau param brahma abhidiyate. So that is that's why Sri Rama, the name Rama means eternal blissful loving devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is Ramante yogina anante. That is the costless, unlimited bliss that is enjoyed. Who enjoys? The yogi. What kind of yogi? The yogi who is rendering loving devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And what kind of enjoyment does a yogi enjoy? Satyanande. That is the real enjoyment, the real bliss. Ramante yogina anante satyanande chidatmani. How does he enjoy that real enjoyment? Within oneself, chidatmani. And that's why the Supreme Personality of Godhead is called Rama. So the last line in this verse is lakṣaṇair anumāpakaiḥ. So by different signs. Lakṣaṇair is translated as by different signs, and anumāpakaiḥ is by hypothesis. So, and the fact is perceived and hypothesized in our acts of seeing and taking help from the intelligence. So that is the lakṣaṇair anumāpakaiḥ. So this is, if you want to associate one verse with this particular verse, that is tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam dadhami buddhi yogam tam yena mamupayantite. That is what we can associate this one verse with, where Kṛṣṇa mentions in that verse that when one is constantly linked to me, satata yuktanam, and through linking with me, one is actually, what is one doing? Bhajatam pritipurvakam. One is rendering loving devotional service with lots of love. Then what happens when one does that? Dadhami buddhi yogam tam. That spiritual intelligence is provided by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And what is that spiritual intelligence? Yena mam upayantite, through which one can come back to me. That is the goal of the human form of life. In the human form of life, one has all the capabilities and abilities to render loving devotional service and go back home, back to Godhead. Labdhva sudurlabham nidam bahu sambhavante manushya marthadam manityam apiha dhira turnam yatet napatet anumrityam yavat nishreyasya vishaya khalu sarvatra syat. So this is mentioned in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam that this human form of life is attained very rarely. Labdhva sudurlabham. Durlabham itself is rare, and sudurlabham is very, very rare. Idam bahu sambhavante. There are many, many birds. Bahunam janmanamante jnanvan mam prapadyate. Vasudeva sarvamiti sa mahatma sudurlabha. Oh, after many, many birds, bahunam janmanamante, who surrenders onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Jnanvan. One who has got this transcendental knowledge. And that is what is mentioned here. This buddhi, this dṛśyair buddhy-ādibhir draṣṭā. This buddhy-ādibhir is that is what is jnanvan. The knowledge that is helping us to understand our original nature as eternal part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is buddhy-ādibhir. That is jnanvan. Jnanvan. So that is the real knowledge. Jnanvan mam. So when there is that real knowledge, what is one doing? Prapadyate. With the real knowledge, one surrenders onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What happens when one surrenders? One knows that Vasudeva Sarvamiti. One understands that everything belongs to Vasudeva, the son of Vasudeva, Sri Kṛṣṇa. Vasudeva Sarvamiti, and such a Mahatma Sudurlabha, such a great soul is very, very rare. So that is what we can understand from this verse. Srila Prabhupada actually has given a very detailed purport. So he actually, first of all, he helps us understand our true spiritual nature. Then he helps us understand how the super spirit, Srila Prabhupada mentions as super spirit, the super self. So super self is present along with the eternal self. The Upanishads give the example of two birds sitting in one tree. Dvau suparna sayujas sakhaya. Samana vrikshe. So they're sitting in the same tree. One bird is enjoying the fruits, and another bird is just looking at the bird that is enjoying the fruit. That is the metaphor that is given in the Upanishad about the soul and the super soul, self and the super self, spirit and the super spirit. Srila Prabhupada uses those words in the purport. So that is the first understanding. So Brahman, Paramatma, and then Bhagavān. Srila Prabhupada also mentions about Bhagavān in this verse, Purushottama. So the realization of super self by the individual self is the beginning of self-realization. And by the progress of such self-realization, one is able to realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead by intelligence, by the help of authorized scriptures, and principally by the grace of the Lord. That is very important there. The grace of the Lord. Tesham evanu kampartham aham ajnanajam tam. That is anukampartha. That is the grace, costless mercy of the Supreme Personality. Nashyami atma bhavasto jnana dipena bhasvata. Tesham eva anukampartham. That is a special mercy that the Supreme Personality of Godhead gives when one is inclined to hear about the Supreme Personality of Godhead and render loving devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The grace of the Lord is coming from that activity. The activity of trying to remember the Lord every time, whenever the time is available. Then there is aham ajnanajam tamah nashyami atma bhavasto jnana dipena bhasvata. So then Krishna gives that atma bhava. That is the understanding of one's eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that lights the lamp of transcendental knowledge. So that is what we can understand from this verse, which is bhagavān sarva-bhūteṣu lakṣitaḥ svātmanā hariḥ dṛśyair buddhy-ādibhir draṣṭā lakṣaṇair anumāpakaiḥ. The personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Kṛṣṇa, is in every living being along with the individual soul, and this fact is perceived and hypothesized in our acts of seeing and taking help from the intelligence. Thank you very much for listening. I'll just have a look at the comments. Manik Roy is saying Radhe Radhe, Aditya Mishra, Nepali, and Maksula Pavan Kalyan. Hare Krishna. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschyadya Deshatarine. Sarvam Shri Krishna Arpanamastu Krishna Matirastu. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.